I never meant for him to hear it. Honestly, I'm not that heartless. My name's Sabrina, I'm 31, and sure, I have a tendency for the dramatic. But this was not part of the plan. I was just sitting in my kitchen, venting to Tracy, my go-to friend, the one who either lifts me up or pulls me back from the edge, depending on the disaster of the day. And at that moment, I was mid-rant. You know what, Trace? I said, swirling my coffee like I was delivering a monologue in some over-the-top soap opera. If I could do it all over again, I wouldn't have married Kit. Yes. I said it. Out loud. Not even in a whisper. Just casual, as if I were complaining about a regrettable haircut. Now, before you clutch your pearls, let me clarify, this wasn't because Kit was awful. He was fine. Decent, even. But lately? Ugh. Predictable. Dull. I mean, if scrolling through his phone while half-watching ESPN counted as a hobby, then he was practically an expert. Tracy gave me a look, eyebrows raised in disbelief. Oh, come on, Sabrina. You don't really mean that. Don't I? I shot back. He's just there. Like a roommate who sometimes pays the bills and sometimes loads the dishwasher incorrectly. And honestly, if I'd known this was what marriage felt like, I would have swiped left on the whole thing. And then I laughed. Actually laughed like some over-the-top rom-com villain. Tracy was giving me that girl, what is wrong with you stare, but before she could say anything, a thick, suffocating silence settled over the room. I turned my head. And there he was. Kit. Standing in the doorway. Staring. His face was unreadable, not angry, not upset. Just blank. But the way my stomach plummeted? I would have preferred if he yelled. Anything but that eerie, wordless reaction. Kit, I started, scrambling to find something, anything, to fix the moment. But he didn't give me a chance. He simply raised his hand, walked to the counter, grabbed his keys, and left. No shouting. No dramatic exits. Just the quiet click of the door shutting behind him. I sat there frozen for what felt like a full minute before turning to Tracy. What the hell was that? She blinked at me, unimpressed. What do you mean, what was that? You just said you wouldn't marry him if you could do it over. What did you expect him to do? High-five you. I rolled my eyes. He's being dramatic. He'll be back in like an hour. Spoiler alert, he wasn't. And I had thoughts about that. An hour turned into 2. Then 3. By midnight, I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through TikTok, pretending I wasn't completely freaking out. But inside? I was furious. Who does he think he is? I muttered, tossing my phone onto the coffee table. Running off like that over one tiny comment? Tracy, still scrolling through Instagram like this was some laid-back girl's night, glanced up. Maybe you should text him. Text him. I scoffed. Why? So he can ignore me and keep acting like a moody teenager? No thanks. He'll come crawling back when he's done sulking. But deep down? I was spiraling. Where was he? What was he doing? Who was he with? Okay, the last one was a stretch, this was Kit we were talking about. The guy thought mismatched socks were rebellious. Still. By 1 in the morning, Tracy finally decided to head home, leaving me alone with my thoughts and growing frustration. After a few minutes of stewing in my irritation, I finally grabbed my phone and sent a quick text. You good? No response. Fine. Be that way. I pulled a blanket around me, curled up on the couch, and told myself I wasn't going to lose sleep over this. He'd be back when he was ready, and when he walked through that door, I'd be waiting with a smug little "I told you so." Except, he didn't come back. By morning, his side of the bed was untouched, his toothbrush still in the bathroom, his shoes still by the door. So no, he hadn't packed up and left me for good. But where was he? I tried calling. Straight to voicemail. Seriously? Who even uses voicemail anymore? At this point, I wasn't just upset. I was livid. How dare he make me worry like this? It wasn't like I had said something that bad. Everyone vents about their spouse to their friends, it's practically a rule of marriage. You complain, your friends roll their eyes, and you move on. Right? But Kit? No. He had to turn it into a whole thing. Grabbing my phone, I called Tracy. The moment she answered, I blurted, "He's still gone." "Did you apologize?" she asked, far too calmly for my liking. Apologize? I repeated, my voice rising. For what? For being honest? For saying something he wasn't even supposed to hear in the first place? Tracy let out a sigh. Sabrina, come on. You basically said you regret marrying him. That's kind of a big deal. I rolled my eyes so hard I was surprised they didn't fall out. Ugh. You sound just like him. By noon, I'd had enough. If Kit wanted to act like a ghost, then fine. I was going to prove I didn't need him. And what better way to do that than a night out? So, with Tracy by my side, I headed to a club, determined to live my best life. What happened next? Well, let's just say it got messy. So here's the thing. I hadn't intended to go completely off the rails that night. But sometimes a girl just needs to shake things up to feel something other than frustration. And Kit's sudden disappearance had left me with a storm of emotions, none of them pleasant. Tracy, naturally, was all for it. You need a distraction, she had declared with a smirk, handing me a dress that was, well, let's just say it was not something you'd wear to a polite Sunday brunch. It was tight, short, and shimmered under the light, the perfect choice for my forget-everything mood. We headed downtown to a club where the music was so loud it drowned out every thought, and the crowd was packed in so tightly it was impossible not to get lost in the energy of it all. Just what I needed. At first, I let the beat take over, dancing away the frustration swirling inside me. But then, well, let's just say tequila has a way of making me bolder. That's when he appeared. I didn't catch his name at first, but he had that easy confidence, the kind that suggested he was used to getting whatever he wanted. Tall, decent-looking, and armed with a grin that could probably get him out of trouble just as easily as it could get him into it. He leaned in close, voice smooth as he said, "You look like trouble." Without missing a beat, I shot back, "And you look like you don't care," because, well, sarcasm is practically my second language. One drink turned into two, conversation flowing effortlessly. Before I knew it, we were laughing, his hands settling on my waist, my head thrown back as if I didn't have a single worry. Tracy had vanished into the crowd, no doubt chasing her own adventure, leaving me alone in this moment I had fully committed to. Was it petty? Absolutely. Was it the right thing to do? Probably not. But in that instant, it felt good, like I was proving a point. If Kit could walk away without a second thought, then why shouldn't I remind myself what it felt like to be wanted? Then, just like that, it happened. Right there on the dance floor, beneath flashing neon lights and surrounded by the pulse of the music, he kissed me. And I didn't stop him. I leaned in, fully embracing the reckless choice I was making. When it was over, he smirked, eyes gleaming. "What's your name?" "Sabrina," I answered, the confidence in my voice far stronger than what I actually felt. He handed me his phone. "Put your number in just in case." And I did. Because, apparently, I wasn't quite finished making bad decisions for the night. By the time Tracy and I stumbled out of the club, my head was spinning, not just from the drinks but from everything I had just done. Deep down, I knew I was spiraling, but I wasn't ready to admit it. Not yet. Instead, I convinced myself that Kit had brought this on himself. He had made me feel like an afterthought, and this was just my way of proving that I didn't need to wait around for him. The guilt wouldn't hit until later. And when it did, it would hit hard. Before you find out what happens next, make sure to subscribe to the channel. The next morning, I woke up to a pounding headache, smudged mascara, and my phone buzzing like it had some kind of personal vendetta against me. For a brief second, I thought it might be Kit, maybe he had come to his senses and finally decided to reach out. But no. It was a text from the guy at the club. Apparently, his name was Jake. His message read, "Morning, Sabrina. Had fun last night. Let's do it again sometime." I groaned and tossed my phone onto the nightstand like it was cursed. What was I even doing? By noon, Tracy called, no doubt eager to dissect my night of questionable choices. "So, how's my favorite troublemaker feeling?" she asked, far too chipper for my current state. "Like a complete disaster," I muttered, dragging myself to the kitchen in desperate need of coffee. "And before you start, yes, I know I messed up." "Hey, no judgment," she said lightly. "But maybe instead of collecting numbers from random guys, you should focus on finding Kit." I rolled my eyes even though she couldn't see me. "Oh, so now you're taking his side?" "I'm on your side," she countered, her tone suddenly more serious. "But you're acting out and you know it. Have you even tried calling him again?" Of course I had. Twice. And both times straight to voicemail. The rejection stung, making me feel like some desperate wife chasing after a man who clearly didn't want to be found. But Tracy had a point. Even if I didn't want to admit it, I needed to find out where Kit was. So I did what any modern woman with a plan would do. I turned into a detective. Checking our bank account, I scanned for any recent activity. And there it was, a charge at a motel just outside of town. Classy, Kit. Real classy. Without a second thought, I grabbed my keys and drove straight there, fully prepared to storm inside and drag him home if I had to. But when I reached the front desk and asked about him, the receptionist barely glanced up, offering only a polite but firm smile. "Sorry, ma'am, we can't give out guest information." I exhaled sharply. "Okay, but he's my husband," I pressed, leaning in. "I really need to talk to him." Her expression didn't change. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Ma'am. If I heard that word one more time, I was going to lose it. But I knew making a scene wouldn't help. Clenching my fists, I turned and walked out, frustration boiling beneath my skin. I knew he was there. I could feel it. But he wouldn't answer my calls, wouldn't acknowledge me, wouldn't even face me. By the time I got home, I was pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. How dare he? I wasn't the villain here. Sure, here's the rewritten version of your story while keeping all the key details intact and making structural changes for better readability. Maybe I had said things I shouldn't have, but this was beyond excessive. Just as I was about to send Kit a furious, all-caps text demanding an explanation, the front door creaked open. And there he was. Kit, as calm and composed as ever, as if he hadn't disappeared for 2 full days, leaving me spiraling into frustration. But he had no idea what was coming. "Oh, so now you decide to show up," I snapped, crossing my arms and leaning against the counter. "Had a nice little getaway, did you?" He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he set his bag down near the couch, shrugged off his jacket, and finally met my gaze. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady, frustratingly neutral, like he wasn't even fazed by what he had put me through. I scoffed, my patience long gone. "Yeah, no kidding." My voice was already rising. 2 days, Kit. 2. And you couldn't bother to pick up the phone? Not even a single text? He let out a slow breath, rubbing the back of his neck, his usual tell when he was trying to keep himself together. I needed space, Sabrina. I had to figure out how to even approach this conversation. "Oh, please," I threw my hands up. "You overheard one private comment, one that wasn't even meant for you, and suddenly you're the biggest victim on the planet?" His expression darkened slightly, but he didn't lose his composure. "It wasn't just one comment," he said, quieter this time. "It was the kind of thing you don't say about someone you love. Not even when they aren't supposed to hear it." "Give me a break, Kit," I shot back. "People vent all the time. You were the one eavesdropping." His eyes flickered with something unreadable. "Eavesdropping? Are you serious right now?" His voice sharpened. "You're blaming me for hearing you say you regret marrying me?" My mouth opened, ready to argue, but then ding, the unmistakable sound of a text message. Kit's gaze shifted to my phone on the counter. Mine followed. And there it was, the message. From Jake, the guy from the club. Kit's jaw clenched as he reached for the phone before I could stop him. He glanced at the screen, his expression unreadable. "Jake?" he said, holding the phone up for me to see. "Who is Jake, Sabrina?" My stomach dropped. My mind raced. "It's not what you think," I stammered. The worst possible thing to say in that moment. "Not what I think?" Kit repeated, his voice dangerously low. "So a random guy texting last night was fun is supposed to mean something other than what I'm thinking?" I opened my mouth to explain, to lie, to something, but nothing came out. Kit let out a sharp, bitter laugh, shaking his head as he placed the phone back down. "You've got to be kidding me." "Kit, wait," I stepped toward him, desperation creeping into my voice. "It didn't mean anything, I was just—" "What?" He cut me off, his control finally snapping. "Blowing off steam? Getting back at me?" His voice was raw now, anger cracking through the cool exterior he had held onto. "Do you really think this is how you fix things? By going out and hooking up with random guys?" "I didn't hook up with him," I shouted, my voice breaking under the weight of the moment. "It was just a kiss. A stupid, meaningless kiss. And that's supposed to make me feel better?" His words were sharp, cutting through the last threads of hope I had left. His anger wasn't loud or explosive, it was cold, resolute. The kind that didn't waver. "You know what?" Kit grabbed his bag, slinging it over his shoulder. "Forget it. This tells me everything I need to know." Panic surged through me. "Wait." I called after him, my vision already blurred with tears. "Kit, please, can we just talk?" My voice cracked. "I messed up, okay? I know I did. But we can fix this." He stopped at the door. Turned back. For a split second, I thought he might reconsider. But then he shook his head. "You don't get it, Sabrina. I'm done." His voice was quiet, but the words struck like a slap. "I've spent years trying to make this work. Trying to be enough for you. And all I ever get in return is criticism and betrayal." His eyes met mine, filled with something final. "I deserve better than this." The air was knocked out of my lungs. My chest felt hollow. "Kit, please," I whispered, barely able to form the words. But he didn't say another thing. He just opened the door, stepped outside, and shut it behind him. I stood there motionless. The silence in the house was suffocating, so thick it made my ears ring. I stared at the door, half expecting him to come back, to tell me he'd changed his mind. But he didn't. Eventually, my legs gave out and I collapsed onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. I tried to make sense of it all. How did we end up here? How did we go from happy, or at least pretending to be, to this? I wanted to blame him. Oh, I wanted to. If he had just stayed and talked things out like an adult, none of this would have spiraled the way it did. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the whole truth. This wasn't just about one overheard comment. Or even about Jake. It was everything. The way I picked at him over the years. The way I made him feel small just so I could feel in control. I had taken him for granted, his patience, his kindness, his loyalty. And now? Now he was gone. The next few days passed in a blur. I went through the motions of life, but I wasn't really living. Work felt meaningless. Food was flavorless. No matter how exhausted I was, sleep never came easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice. Calm, steady, and so heartbreakingly final. I deserve better. Those words stung more than I could have imagined. I reached out to him, keeping my messages light, trying to open a door. Hey, just checking in. Are you okay? No response. Another text followed. Can we please talk? I'm sorry. I mean it. Still, silence. By the end of the week, I was unraveling. I had to see him, to talk to him, to find some way to undo the damage I had caused. When Saturday arrived, he finally said he'd be coming by to pick up his things. A small part of me clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, I could change his mind. But when he walked through the door, something about him was different. His posture was straighter, his jaw set with quiet determination. He trimmed his beard and was wearing a shirt that, for once, fit him well. Even his scent had changed, like he'd started wearing cologne again. It felt like some cruel irony, as if he had stepped into a better version of himself right when I was falling apart. Hey, I greeted him awkwardly, lingering by the counter as he entered. Hey, he replied, his voice polite but distant. No warmth. No small talk. Without hesitation, he walked straight to the bedroom and started packing, treating it like nothing more than a simple chore. I followed, my stomach twisting. Kit, can we talk? My voice was softer than I intended, almost hesitant. He didn't pause. Didn't even look at me. About what? About us, I said, stepping closer. I know I messed up. But I don't want to lose you. For the first time, he turned to face me, his expression unreadable. Sabrina, you've already made it clear how you feel. I'm just here to get my things. That's not fair, I blurted out, desperation creeping in. You don't understand, He cut me off, his voice calm but carrying an edge I had never heard before. I don't understand? He let out a hollow laugh. Sabrina, you kissed another guy. You gave him your number. What exactly am I missing here? Tears threatened to spill, but I forced them back. It was a mistake. I was angry. I wasn't thinking. He shook his head, his voice firm but not cruel. No, you were thinking. You just didn't think I'd ever find out. I wanted to argue, to insist he was wrong, but I couldn't. Because he wasn't. Do you even want this marriage anymore? He asked, his gaze searching mine. Or am I just a placeholder for the life you think you should have? His words hit like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. This time, I couldn't stop the tears. I want you, Kit, I whispered, barely audible. I know I've been awful and I've taken you for granted, but I can change. I swear I can. He exhaled slowly, setting down the box he was holding. Sabrina, I hope you do. But not for me. For yourself. He looked at me then, truly looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that shattered me. Resignation. I can't keep doing this. I've spent years trying to be enough for you, and all it's done is make me feel like less. I reached for his hand, a silent plea, but he stepped back, shaking his head. I deserve better than this, he said quietly. And so do you. Maybe we're just not what each other needs anymore. And just like that, it was over. He finished packing, then gave me one last look, one filled with sadness, but also certainty. Without another word, he turned and walked out, leaving me alone with the wreckage I had created. I wanted to chase after him, to beg him to stay, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't change anything. He was done. And for the first time, I truly understood what that meant. I might have lost him forever. The days that followed felt like one endless gut punch. Everywhere I turned, there was something that reminded me of him. His favorite coffee mug, the one with the tiny chip on the rim he refused to throw away. His side of the bed, still perfectly made and untouched, a cruel reminder of his absence. Even the playlist we used to listen to while cooking, every song seemed to mock me now. At first, I convinced myself he'd come back. That this was just another fight, that after a week or two he'd realize he couldn't live without me. It had always been our pattern. He'd pull away, I'd get angry, and eventually we'd move on. But this time felt different. When he did text, his messages were polite. Distant. Like he was addressing a coworker, not the woman he once built a life with. Hope you're doing okay. I'll swing by this weekend to pick up the rest of my things. That was it? No, how are you? No, let's talk. Nothing that hinted at even a flicker of hope. As the weekend approached, anxiety twisted in my gut. I replayed every possible scenario in my head, imagining how I could convince him we weren't beyond repair. I even cleaned the house as if spotless countertops could somehow erase my mistakes. But when he arrived, I almost didn't recognize him. There was a lightness about him as if some invisible weight had lifted. He looked good. Annoyingly good. "Hey," he said, his tone neutral as he set down a couple of empty boxes. "Hey," I echoed, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. I watched him move through the house, packing his belongings with quiet efficiency. Each item he took, each moment that passed, made my chest ache a little more. This was real. There was no pretense, no bluff. Kit was serious. Taking a shaky breath, I finally broke the heavy silence. "Kit," I said, my voice laced with desperation, "can we talk? Please?" He hesitated for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then his voice came, steady but firm. "Sabrina, we've already talked. There's nothing more to say." "No, that's not true. There's still so much left unsaid," I blurted, my voice cracking under the weight of my emotions. "I know I've been awful. I know I took you for granted, said things I never should have. But I love you, Kit. I really do. And I can change. I will change. Just tell me what to do, and I'll do it." He let out a weary sigh, running a hand through his hair, the exhaustion evident in his stance. "Sabrina, I don't doubt that you mean it. But the problem is I've always been the one holding this together. The only reason you want to change now is because you're afraid of losing me. But where was that effort when I needed you to be there? When I needed to feel seen?" His words hit me like a blow, but I refused to back down. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered, "I see you now." His voice softened, barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of finality. "It's too late." The crack in his voice told me this wasn't easy for him either. "I gave you everything I had, Sabrina. But I can't keep pouring into something that gives nothing back. I'm empty." Panic surged through me as I reached out, grabbing his arm, desperate to stop him from leaving. "Please, Kit. Don't do this. We can fix it. We can go to therapy, we can heal." "Sabrina," he interrupted, his tone gentle but resolute. "This isn't about punishing you. I need to choose myself for once. And maybe you need to do the same." My fingers slipped away from his arm, my entire body trembling. Without another word, he picked up his last box, cast me one final glance, and walked out the door. A month later, I saw him again. It was a simple coffee shop, nothing extraordinary, but the sight of him sitting there, smiling, laughing, so effortlessly happy made my stomach twist. Across from him sat a woman I didn't recognize. She wasn't the kind of beauty that turned heads instantly, but she had a quiet confidence, something natural, effortless, the kind of grace that couldn't be faked. For a moment, I stood frozen in place, debating whether to walk over and interrupt their moment. But then I saw it, the way he smiled at her. It was easy, unburdened, the kind of expression I hadn't seen on him in so long. Then his eyes met mine. For just a second, his smile wavered. He gave me a small nod, acknowledgement, not an invitation, before turning back to his conversation as if I were nothing more than a passing stranger. As I walked out of the coffee shop, the weight of everything I had done, everything I had lost, crashed down on me. This was my fault. I had spent so much time tearing him down, trying to feel better about myself by pointing out his flaws, that I had been blind to everything he had given me. And now? Now he was moving on while I stood alone in the wreckage of what we used to be. For the first time, true loneliness settled in. And the worst part? There was no one to blame but myself. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to the channel. Wishing you a great day and all the best.